Okay. Yes, Jack.
Yeah, on the, which sheet is this? Okay, one of your handouts, the three, at the top, it says the three experiences we crave. One, the middle quote by Stephanie Kaza, when she says deep identification with the separate self as autonomous and fixed prevents us from experiencing the world as relational and co-creative, always in dynamic flux. My curiosity is about the separate self. So what does then a non-separate self look like?
Can you imagine a self without there being an other?
Okay.
I'm only a teacher because you're students, right? But if you turn around and teach a class, you'll be the teacher and I'll be the students. So all selves say, I'm a self and you're a self. Well, to me, you're the other, and to you, I'm the other. But anyway, our selves only arise in relation to each other. If my wife comes through the door, I'll turn around and be, her husband. So there's no fixed self. There's only a self that's relating to an other. And we tried to kind of delve into that last week of, can you find a fixed permanent self anywhere in your experience? Or when you actually look, is it more like I just described? Well, I'm this self at home and I'm that self at work. And it's always in relationship.
So she could have phrased that using a relational self. Okay.
Self and other is a relationship. There is no self and there is no other. There is a relationship.
Okay.
Black is black because white is white. Large is large because small is small. A walnut is large compared to a mustard seed. But a walnut is tiny compared to a tree. So what's the nature of a walnut? It's large or small depending on what it's related to.
Thank you.
Small and large do exist. Self and other do exist, but only when they're relating. Which is why I try to get away from the, we don't have a self, or try to see your, try to realize your non-self. What I think of is try not to see yourself as fixed and permanent.
Yeah, because what I read somewhere else, I read in Tricycle magazine, a quote, "There is no self" is the granddaddy of fake Buddhist quotes. Does that make sense to you?
I don't know if it's fake, unless the teacher or the practitioner is like trying to fool themselves that there's something called a non-self, and I'm trying to find it. Okay. When I've tried to get rid of myself, and I have many times, it's always because I don't like the self that is arising. I want to get rid of my grumpy self. I want to get rid of my tired self. So I try to convince myself I have no self. It's not like, it is fakey, like fakey practice. If I can look at myself, if I can start talking about George, well, now there's two selves. The one who's looking and talking is relating to that other George that he doesn't like.
Hmm.
So that's why it's fakey. It's you will never find emptiness or non-self. You will find, if you look and believe what you actually experience, that there is no fixed permanent self separate from what it does and what it relates to.
Thank you.
The Buddha refused to say, is there a self or is there not a self? He said, no, self is not what it appears to be. Kind of slippery stuff, which is why we use shamatha and stable attention to turn and look. What is myself? What is it I'm calling myself? Where is that thing that I'm calling myself? What actually is it? But you don't really need to talk to yourself. You just need to turn your awareness to an experience you have many times a day, but you don't actually see what's there. You see what you think is there. That's actually a good lead-in to this evening, because I want to turn to, we've been talking about insight. We've talked a lot about attention, shamatha, stable insight, or stable attention, and insight or vipassana. And it can make it seem like Buddhism is a very conceptual, philosophical, even a cold kind of thing. It's an intellectual thing. And that, I think, is also a fake Buddhism, if you want to talk about it that way. Chitta in Sanskrit is usually translated as mind. And in English, we think of, the thinking mind. What we think is it, my mind is what thinks, and it's in my brain. But chitta in Sanskrit equally refers to the heart, the emotions, and to intentions, what the mind intends. So chitta is actually a kind of heart-mind intention. Is actually a more accurate translation. So mind training in the Tibetan tradition is actually heart training or intention training. Instead of being, cherishing myself, I'll cherish others. That's mind training. So the mind has to come along and see things differently, but actually the hard part, and this evening will be more difficult, at least for me, than talking about the mind and what we see and how we think. It's harder for me to talk about how we feel and how we relate. That may say more about me than it does about the topic itself, but if the self is a slippery concept, then, my heart or my aspiration is even slipperier. The compassion is a kind of shortcut for the four immeasurables, or the four Brahma Viharas, if you're from the Theravada tradition, Vipassana tradition. They're called Brahma Viharas. Vihara is a place like a temple or an ashram. It's a place you live. Brahma is the king of the gods in the Hindu or Vedic religions. And so Brahma Vihara is a place where the gods live, a sublime place. And the four immeasurables, these four Brahma Viharas, are kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So kindness, it's usually translated as loving kindness. the word karuna in Sanskrit actually comes from the same root as karma. Kara, karuna, actually means to do or to make. So it comes from the same root as karma. So compassion in Buddhism is not just feeling sorry. It's not just sympathy or not just empathy. If someone cries, I cry. Compassion is the intention, the aspiration to relieve someone of their suffering. Whether I can or not is another matter, but I at least have the intention. I see someone suffer, I see someone in pain, I know how that feels. And so I want to help them. Kindness, metta in Pali or Maitri in Sanskrit, is often translated, that's what's translated as loving kindness. But it's not, again, I'll quibble with the English because metta is not love. Love in English has a very different meaning. Maybe the Latin terms, that came like agape or caritas, charity, or what's the familial love, where you want to protect someone in your family. You just have an instinct to sacrifice yourself for someone in your family. It's that kind of kindness, not love per se. I think a better translation would be friendliness. Metta is being friendly toward another. You're open, you're friendly, you care about them. It's kindness in the sense of caring. But it's not loving them. Almost always in English, love is preferential, right? We love some people and hate others, or we love our friend, but not our neighbor the same way. Metta can be immeasurable. This kindness can be immeasurable. It can be extended equally to all beings. And the four immeasurables, that's what we're trying to do. This friendliness or loving kindness, this compassion that wants to relieve suffering, we try to make it boundless. That's why it becomes immeasurable. When I see my enemy doing something because they're suffering, I have compassion and I want to relieve them of that fear or that hatred that makes them do something destructive. So I'm friendly, I care, and my compassion makes me want to relieve them. In fact, I might have more compassion for someone that I don't like because I see them doing something harmful. Easy to love my friends, better to love my enemies if I can relieve them of what makes them my enemies. The third immeasurable is mudita, usually translated as sympathetic joy. It's being happy because someone else is happy. If they succeed, or they're happy, or they're at peace, it makes me happy to see that. Again, toughest to practice this with an enemy. If my enemy succeeds in a project, can I be happy? If my friend succeeds in a project, can I be happy? Can I actually rejoice in that, or am I a little jealous or envious? So each of the immeasurables has has a far enemy and a near enemy. The far enemy is like the opposite. So the opposite of sympathetic joy is jealousy or envy. The opposite of compassion, the desire to relieve someone of suffering, the opposite of compassion is cruelty. The opposite of friendliness or loving kindness is, dislike or hatred. And the fourth immeasurable, equanimity, the opposite or the far enemy is to be prejudiced or, it could be to be prejudiced. If I'm equanimous with my compassion, whether it's a friend or an enemy, I still have compassion, right? I'm equanimous. I'm not biased toward my friend and away from my enemy. But the opposite of equanimity could also be, drama, getting overexcited, over upset, or over elated, exaggerated reaction to things. So these four, loving kindness, which I'll emphasize the kindness part, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, they're related to each other. You actually can't really practice any one of them without bringing the other three along. And one of the reasons is because of the near enemies. So the far enemy is the opposite. The opposite of compassion is cruelty. But the near enemy of compassion is pity, right? It looks like compassion, but it comes from a place of superiority, looking down on someone suffering and wishing they wouldn't do that. It might feel and look like compassion, but true compassion is empathetic. I know what that feels like, so I want to relieve you of that pain or suffering. Pity just looks and says, oh, those poor homeless people, just terrible. But there's no relating to it except from a position of superiority. The near enemy of kindness, loving kindness, is to be attached. I love my wife. I love my friends. I love my kids, but not your kids. So it's a preferential love. Love compared to dislike or apathy. And the near enemy of equanimity is dullness or indifference. I'm not getting excited about suffering because I don't care. I'm not suffering, so I don't care. I don't feel it. So we're not trying to cultivate indifference to suffering or joy, right? You could be indifferent to someone's joy. Well, they've won the lottery. What do I care? Or they've got a promotion at work, but it's not about me, so I don't care. That's a fake equanimity. I go through all these details because they fascinate me. But if you practice the immeasurables for any length of time, you will encounter the far and near enemies. You will see what blocks genuine compassion. You'll see what blocks immeasurable kindness. And so whether you can, put them in a chart like I do and get fascinated with the dynamics between them, you'll find them anyway. When you try to cultivate the intention of kindness, compassion, joy, or equanimity. So let's do a little practice. In the Theravada, these are the Brahma Viharas, as they call them, the boundless states, are practiced in a particular order that makes sense. They're not always practiced that way in the Mahayana, in the Tibetan or Zen tradition. But it's another thing you'll encounter. So maybe looking at the Theravada order, classic order, will be useful. You always start with yourself. If you want to cultivate compassion for other people, you have to know how pain and suffering feel. You have to have some compassion for yourself if you want it for other people. Same with kindness. Same with joy. If you never have joy, if you prevent joy from arising in your experience, it's unlikely you're going to rejoice when you see someone else happy. So you start with yourself. May I be kind. May I meet my experience with kindness. Or compassion. May I experience compassion for my own suffering. May I cultivate the intention to relieve my experience of suffering. You start with yourself, and then you either do a friend or someone who has benefited you, like a teacher or a school teacher. I think of my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Henke. I wasn't very happy in fourth grade, and Mr. Henke used to take me aside during recess when I was getting in fights with other kids, and he'd walk with me and talk with me. I still remember him from fourth grade. He was very kind, very compassionate. He knew somehow what I was going through. And so it's easy for me to wish him kindness, appreciation. So you work with yourself, then you work with someone you appreciate, then you work with a friend, because of course you feel kindly in general and compassionate. You are happy when they're happy. Then you work with strangers, someone you works at the grocery store, a neighbor that you see on the street but you don't really know. You work with them. May they be happy. May they be free of suffering. Then you work with those you dislike, your enemies, as they call them. We all say, oh, we don't have any enemies. Well, there's probably somebody you don't like very much. So they're tougher to work with. But if you can have sympathetic joy for yourself or for a friend, then maybe you can extend it to an enemy. And then we extend it to everyone, to groups of people, everybody in Portland, everybody in North America, everybody in the world. You expand it out to all beings. There's lots of texts and articles and things that suggest phrases to train your heart and mind in the four immeasurables. What I found was that they were helpful for a while, and then I had to create my own that were based in my own experience and addressed the near and far enemies that I encountered. So some of the phrases I use for loving kindness are, may I be safe. And then I extend it. May my benefactors be safe. May my benefactors be healthy and strong. May I enjoy a happy heart and peace of mind. May my benefactors enjoy peace of mind and a happy heart. And so on. May the clerk at the grocery store be happy and healthy and peaceful. May my enemies be happy and healthy and peaceful. If only they, because they'll stop bothering me. So some of the phrases for loving kindness are, for me, are may all be safe, may all be healthy and strong. May all enjoy the ease of well-being. May I and you and everyone enjoy the support of dear ones and community. May I and you and all be endowed with faith, wisdom, and kindness. So it's wanting yourself and others to have peace, happiness, joy, success. It can be worldly happiness too. May people have enough food. May people be safe from storms and fires. May people feel secure. So it's a contemplative exercise. You use words, and as the near and far enemies come up, the excuses or the resistance or the kind of fakey look-alike qualities come up, you see. It's an insight practice because you see how it works. You see what is conducive to kindness and what is not, what's an obstacle to kindness. Slowly, slowly train yourself the way you return your attention to the breath. It's a training. Train yourself to wish yourself and others kindness. For compassion, may all be free from inner and outer harm. May all be free from misery and struggle. May all be free from disease and affliction. May all be free from hunger and poverty. And we also go after the causes of suffering. May all be free from anger, ill will, and greed. Those are the causes of suffering. If I'm compassionate, I want someone to be free of the greed and hatred and confusion that cause their suffering, as well as myself. I don't just want or expect to be happy. We're not praying to a god or some magical, powerful person. We will be happy when we stop producing the causes of unhappiness. May we be free from desire and busyness. May we be free from jealousy and competitiveness. May we be free from pride and arrogance. Sympathetic joy is joy in the happiness and success of others. That's the sympathetic joy, and I kind of stretch it in my mind. I want to include myself like I do in the kindness and compassion. I want to take joy in my own happiness and success. So here, mudita, sympathetic joy it's also gratitude and appreciation. Can I take joy in my warm house, in my plentiful food? Can I take joy in the friends and neighbors that have actually been very kind and helpful to me? So we appreciate joy, happiness, success, and any good qualities, whether they arise in us or in someone else. May we delight in the success and happiness of ourselves and others. May we be free of jealousy, envy, and enmity toward others. May we support the well-being of others. May everyone enjoy life just as they wish. May everyone enjoy success in what they set out to do. You might think, well, we don't want a dictator who starts a war to succeed. But the Buddha comes from the understanding that anything we do is because we think it will make us happy. It is our confusion about the causes of happiness and unhappiness that lead us to do things. No matter how twisted an act, that person thought it was going to make them happy. So here we're wishing them success in being happy. We don't wish them success in robbing the bank. We wish them success in what they're trying to achieve. Security, plenty, whatever it is. Along the same lines, may all enjoy leisure, wealth, and prosperity. May nobody work too hard. May nobody work themselves to the bone. May people enjoy leisure. May everyone share their wealth and happiness. That's a cause of happiness. May virtue, happiness, and good fortune continue and grow. May everyone enjoy harmony and friendship. May everyone know delight, pleasure, and well-being. And may we all discover boundless joy. And then verses for equanimity. Equanimity we could define as flexible stability, clarity, and balance in the midst of experience. So it's not a flat affect, indifference or apathy, like never get excited. It's flexible stability, clarity, and balance in whatever experience arises. If I'm happy, may I have equanimity. If I'm unhappy, may I have equanimity. May we accept things just as they are. May we be undisturbed, free from distraction and confusion. May everyone calmly abide in the midst of change. May we be free of attachment, aversion, and indifference. May we know open clarity, free from preference and prejudice. May we see the essential equality of all beings. May we embrace others with impartiality. One of the examples of how the four immeasurables interact, we can have compassion for someone, really want them to be free of suffering and get frustrated when we can't, or they won't. So equanimity can balance compassion. May we care for others, yet know each is the owner of their deeds. We each experience the consequences of our own actions. So I want you to be free of suffering, but I can't make it happen. I also have equanimity knowing that you can make it happen. And I really want you to. May we be peaceful, stable, and secure, no matter what changes our life goes through. May losing my job not ruin my peace of mind. May illness not destroy my appreciation for life. So are there any questions or comments, or maybe comparisons with the way you've learned these? Because they are, like all the Buddhist traditions, they're working with universal human qualities, but they do it in a very different way. And I enjoy kind of doing a little cross training and considering how other traditions do it. Because the traditions, like the rituals in the Vedas, get set in stone, and pretty soon you're doing something very much by repetition and rote. So I'd be interested if people have questions or discussion for a few minutes before we take a break.
George, I can talk a little about the Theravada traditions that I've practiced. And one thing that I notice, especially on retreat, there's an emphasis on the state of loving kindness, the state of compassion, where you're essentially instructed to include, to sort of create a space for loving kindness. So it's not so much the individual, but like I would have the wish to practice loving kindness for the benefit of all beings. And I remember one example that really drove it home for me, and that was, you know, when you go on retreat in the beginning, you're practicing noble silence and people are uncomfortable early on, especially at, you know, mealtime, for example, because at the time you're used to talking, but you're trying to practice this noble silence and everybody's kind of tense. And the teacher talked about sprinkling loving kindness all into the group so that everybody could practice silence with loving kindness. And it was just an opportunity to relax around strangers. It was very effective. And the other thing that comes up for me is around compassion. Especially, we talk about may have compassion for how the others and help to relieve their difficulties and suffering without avoidance or turning away, which I think is a particular challenge in a privileged environment. It's that feeling of walking by somebody on the street who's maybe, you know, panhandling, and it's not that you're going to give them money, but that you're going to see them. You're going to have a sense of not turning away. It's kind of a no judgment. And again, I think that's it's a first world issue, but it comes up for a lot of people. And in the Theravada practice, we spend a lot of time on practicing for yourself, because that's where a lot of practitioners really have problems, to offer loving kindness to themselves. For a lot of people, there's a real sense of we have to fake it till we make it, because it feels hokey. Feels like, you know, I'm good. So I think really focusing on bringing up a feeling of caring and acting for your own benefit in a peaceful, non-judgmental way.
Yes, thank you.
The other two, you kind of same thing.
Yeah, thank you. Lama Lakshmi and I have talked about something over the years, not exactly a complaint, more like a kind of egging each other on to take something seriously, which is, and again, I may be talking more about myself than the Buddhist tradition. But there's a lot of emphasis on insight, knowing. I mean, Buddha itself is a title, right? A Buddha is someone who's awake, someone who's aware. But the way I see it, and what I think I need personally, at least as much as insight, is compassion. The first noble truth is that there's suffering. The Buddha didn't say there's confusion and we ought to get smart. He said there's suffering and let's find the cause and the way out. I think if we practiced the four immeasurables and nothing else, we would have the insights. We would realize that I am not over here, training my mind for the benefit of my life. We will see that I don't exist without, this evening, I don't exist without you. And I don't exist without my family and neighbors. So I very much appreciate, you bringing up the relational aspect again. This is something we do not only for each other, but with each other. Couldn't be done. A compassionate, kind, joyful person in a cave doesn't have much effect. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, George. Most of my practice has been going to Zen retreats, and because that's what we have around here. So I spent part of my summer doing that. And I noticed that if I missed it a summer, my school year, my work year would be pretty miserable. I could get stuck in a lot of ways. And I remember going one time, I had lost my job, everything was going wrong, and I was self-sabotage. I was sabotaging myself. I couldn't get a job. And I went to the retreat. We sat for 7-8 days. And when I came back, all the obstructions seemed to have, sort of melted away. And I didn't do anything really. I was just going there and doing the practice. So it's a somewhat mysterious sort of, but that sort of seemed to work. It brings in the four immeasurables just sort of from not doing anything. And I mentioned to you that I used to ask my teacher about the Four Noble Truths, and he would never talk about it. He didn't want to talk about that. He just said, so that's just a comment there that that's what I do. And besides the other reading and study of different Buddhist traditions.
Your first comment makes me compare the four immeasurables to awareness. Awareness is a quality we have. It's our inherent nature, right? But our confusion temporarily gets in the way. But our awareness is always there. And the same with the four immeasurables. We are naturally, inherently compassionate, kind, joyful, balanced, equanimous. But our jealousy, our apathy gets in the way. So yeah, I think all you have to do is sit still and stop doing other things long enough for your natural qualities to start emerging again, and you will recognize them as deeper and older friends than your habitual reactions. The other part, your teachers not talking about the Four Noble Truths. What's your sense of what that was about?
I really don't know. I think we were just sitting, and he had his stories and his way of presenting things, and he wasn't he didn't seem particularly interested in that. So I just let it go. And
What's your sense of the intention of his teaching and practice?
well, he's very intellectual. So he has some really startling things to say that would just make you lose your mind sort of sitting there. I think he just probably just had perhaps his own way of, he had been strictly Zen and never just talked about suffering. I think it was more like being aware, as you said.
I think some teachers primarily teach awareness and insight. Others primarily teach kindness and compassion. And I think somewhere they meet in the middle, even if it might be because a teacher is biased or
Right.
not completely enlightened or whatever. I think, teachers teach what they know. But I'm confident that if we actually see clearly the way things are, we're going to be kind and compassionate and have some joy. And if we genuinely cultivate kindness and compassion and joy, we're going to start to see things much clearer, like I'm not the center of the universe.
I studied for a week with Natalie Goldberg, the Zen teacher who her practice is writing, and but it's the experience of writing. She's not talking so much about publishing, but the direct experience that comes when you keep the pen moving. And I was at a big writer's workshop back east, and 95% of them had no real concept around Buddhism or whatever. And Natalie Goldberg would just say, shut up and write. And of course she admitted she was from Long Island, but there was an abruptness to her, somewhat like you're saying, Chris, this notion of jumping into cold water, that you can talk about your problems for forever and ever, but you got to stop and sit. That was very much her approach to her Zen practice, was just sit, don't think, which, I found a little bit abrupt. If I could do that, I wouldn't be here, right? But on some level, her abruptness did work for a lot of people, because they knew that, I never heard Natalie Goldberg talk about loving kindness, to be honest, but her heart was good. She could relate to people, but she also had this abruptness that I think she's Soto Zen. I'm not sure which lineage, but there's an abruptness to it for sure.
It can be a great act of kindness to shout at someone, wake them up.
Right, literally.
And it can also be very wise and insightful, just to give someone a ride when they're on the side of the road.
Mm.
Even if teachers are partial, I've had so many teachers, and I can remember one or two or three really important things that I've learned from each one. Very different kinds of things. A way of relating to other people, a way of looking at something in my experience, a way of dealing with my grumpiness and my temper. So with luck, we find a good teacher that can help us, mentor us, or teach us what particular, as Michael Conklin would say, our particular sufferings.
Mhm.
And if we're really lucky, we can find several teachers that help us with several particular sufferings.
Mhm.
We've been here an hour and I could just go on all night, but I think we should take a break. If only to make the second hour better. So let's return at 7:40 with
It's
water.
very compassionate. Thank you.
Smart too. Otherwise, people would just leave. So we'll return at 7:40.
And you can, what do you want out of the school system? You know what? Well, you're probably not going to do that.
Not many. Well, man.
There's a prayer called the 108 Verses in Praise of Great Compassion, written by a 20th century Mongolian teacher. And he says that the The quality that makes a Buddha is compassion. And the teaching that makes the Dharma is compassion. And the behavior that makes the Sangha a Sangha is compassion. So the three jewels, the three objects that we take, the three things we take refuge in, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha because they're imbued with compassion. That's what makes them fitting objects of refuge. And that if you actually have genuine compassion, which I think includes kindness and joy and equanimity, but compassion as the primary jewel, if you have that, the other qualities will come. Other teachers also say that if you have insight, if you really know how things are genuinely, then compassion will arise. In my experience, insight arises from genuine compassion more reliably than compassion arises from insight. I know teachers that are very insightful, very powerful, their insight into how things work. But they may not have a whole lot of compassion. Now, compassion without intelligence, Trungpa used to call idiot compassion. So there's a fakey compassion as well as fakey insight. But for my money, and again, I'm probably revealing something about myself here, but I would bet on the practice of compassion leading to the other qualities: generosity, clarity, ethics. I think those arise more reliably from compassion, kindness, compassion, than from insight alone. In fact, the Pratyeka Buddha in the Theravada tradition is someone who's come to enlightenment. They have completely severed the confusion and craving that cause suffering by meditating and understanding the 12 links of interdependence. They know how things work and have freed themselves. But you never meet one, and they never teach because they don't have compassion. So from the earliest times of Buddhism, there was this warning about the Pratyeka Buddha, the practitioner who enlightens themselves, but is not really of any benefit to others. And in some ways, this is why the Mahayana arose. The teachings of insight and the analysis of interdependence and realization of how things were empty, the characteristics of things, was so powerful and so evolved that some groups wanted to bring compassion back to an equal role. And so you often see the triad. You have wisdom, compassion, and skillful means. Those three things in the Mahayana are equally important. And because I'm biased this way, I would put compassion at the top. Compassion and wisdom Of course, they're the two wings in Mahayana. They're the two wings of the bird. You can't have actual wisdom and actual compassion without the other. But then they also have this third of skillful means. So now that you have wisdom and compassion, what you're going to do in the world for the benefit of others. From this 108 verses, the suffering of the world is the result of self-cherishing, while happiness is the reward for cherishing others. Only you, protector compassion, can provide the confidence that this is so. And I wanted to introduce mind training, Tonglen, taking and sending, maybe probably crazy to try to fit that in. But I, especially in March, I think mid-March, Lama Lecce is going to start a 6-month study group on mind training, taking and sending. And so I would encourage you to participate in that. I think it meets once a week for 6 months, starting in March. But tonight I'll just say that taking and sending, also known as mind training or Lo Zhang, Lo is training, Zhang is mind in Tibetan. But again, mind training, heart training. And taking and sending, the particular practice, is actually a way to practice all 4 immeasurables at once. In taking and sending, we reverse the usual habits we have of grasping at pleasure and pushing away suffering. We reverse it. When something pleasant arises, we offer it to others. When something unpleasant arises in my experience, I don't push it away. I invite it in. When I feel anger arise, I take it in, and I also take in all the anger of other people. There's a verse, when I'm happy, may my merit flow to others. May its blessings fill the sky. When I'm unhappy, may the sorrows of all beings be mine. May the ocean of suffering run dry. So no matter what happens, pleasant or unpleasant, I can practice with it on the spot. I can do it on the cushion, but I can also do it when someone yells at me in the street. Take it in, experience it fully with equanimity, and also invite in all the anger that person is throwing at me. May he be relieved of it. I'll take it. I'll take it and experience it because I know it's just experience. And I've trained myself in equanimity. And I'll give him my patience and my clarity. I'll give him my happiness and the causes of my happiness. May he have those. And I take joy in doing that. So it's kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, all in one exchange. If you have practiced with kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity to the point where you have an experience of each of them, not that you master them, experience them all the time, but if you have a relationship with these 4 intentions, and I would say they're more than feelings or emotions. If they're emotions, they're non-self-centered emotions, so they're certainly different than other emotions. If they're feelings, they're more than just a pleasure or displeasure. I would say there has to be an intention there too. If you've trained yourself in the intention to be kind, compassionate, joyful, and equanimous, then you could practice taking and sending. it's just a kind of a supercharged way of practicing the immeasurables, and it's especially suited to off the cushion practice. You can love everybody in the world, but when somebody cuts you off in traffic, can you take in their impatience and give them your clarity and calm? It's an internal practice. You see a homeless person, you could offer them your house. You don't actually give them your house. That might be a good thing to do, but in the practice of taking and sending, you don't actually give them your house. You imagine giving them your house. A drunk guy lying on the sidewalk. I give you my sobriety. I give you my house. I will take your place. I will be homeless for a while. It will undo my self-grasping and self-cherishing. And it's another reminder for me that kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity are not like separate things that have kind of been packaged together for convenience. They're actually 4 aspects of the clarity and compassion that this whole thing revolves around. And the last thing I wanted to say before we can have discussion is that the 4 immeasurables are, and I include mind training and taking and sending with that as a variation on the 4 immeasurables. The 4 immeasurables bring me back to refuge, bodhicitta, and dedication, which in the Tibetan tradition, less so in the Theravada tradition, but certainly in all the Mahayana traditions, Tibetan and Zen, and especially Tibetan tradition, refuge, bodhicitta, and dedication are whatever practice you're doing in the middle, refuge and bodhicitta and dedication are the bread, and whatever the practice is you're doing is the meat, but you always have a practice sandwich. You don't just do the practice. You take refuge and bodhicitta in the beginning, and you dedicate the practice when you're done. We've talked about refuge and good practice. I think a part of taking refuge maybe even is to spend a moment before you say a verse, if you're doing it the formal way with a verse, but part of taking refuge is recalling what it is you're taking refuge in and why. Why are you taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha instead of money, fame, and praise? And what have I taken refuge in the past that I want to turn now and take refuge in the 3 jewels? And bodhicitta is just taking that refuge for the sake of all beings, not just for myself. When I'm honest, half the time I sit down to practice is just so I can calm down, so I'm not so agitated, right? I'm just after a pleasant feeling in the end. So when I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, I take refuge in waking up for the sake of all beings, to train myself not to try to shelter, take refuge for myself, but to do it for all beings. So whenever in the Mahayana you say I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, may I awaken for the sake of all beings. May I practice generosity and other virtues for the sake of all beings. That's why I'm practicing. And then dedication at the end, to remind yourself again, oh, now I'm calm. I got rid of my frustration. A good session, right? I feel good. Oops. May I take that pleasure, that benefit, that calm, that clarity, whatever comes out of that practice, whatever I felt while I practiced, whatever goods come out of it after. I don't get in an argument with my wife or whatever. May all that benefit also go in equal measure to all beings. So before I can grasp and be satisfied with my calm and clarity, which after all are just temporary states, before I get up from the cushion, I give them away. In my mind, my heart and mind, I give them away for the benefit of all beings. May they all experience calm and clarity. It's a way of orienting your practice, refuge and bodhicitta, so that your practice is done for the right reason. And at the end, it's a way of protecting your calm, clarity, whatever you got is protected by giving it away rather than grasping, because grasping is the problem in the first place. Another reason why I think compassion is just as important as wisdom. Wisdom could be used to make money, to wield power, to etc. Intelligence, anyway, could be used for that. Usually is, actually. But compassion and kindness and joy have a tendency to want to be shared. So whenever I practice the four immeasurables, I usually remember refuge and dedication a little more deeply or more consistently. So let's have a discussion about anything from tonight or the previous classes, whatever. We have half hour, so.
George, I wonder if I could ask about the 12 links, because my experience of them, and this might sound like a cop-out, I don't know, it's been more intuitive than cognitive. In the sense that I'm not sure my mind has ever been so still that I can imagine seeing these links at one time. Or, I mean, I have had the experience of when the contact and the reaction arises, I can see it and then stop myself from that reaction. But it's come to me in much more of an intuitive sense through the body.
Well, that's great. Then you don't need the map.
Right. Well, yeah, I was kind of hoping you'd tell me that.
Absolutely. The map, this is another reason, well, to be honest, it shows my bias. I like maps. You should see the charts I put together. I won't subject you to those, but that's my proclivity, and in a way it's my strength. It's also my weakness.
Mm.
The map, any map, is for getting around in the reality. If you can go straight to the direct experience of, attraction, grasping, greed, and cut it, then you don't need the map. The map may be worth having on the wall, like you'd have a map of, New York City.
Right.
Because it reminds you of a place you'd like to visit, and you might see a little park there that you hadn't thought about or been to in many years. So the next time you go, the map might remind you of something. But if you're from New York City, you probably won't take the map with you. So
Well, I mean, I do see the value of trying to explain this to someone, even when you have the intuitive experience. I mean, and
maybe I'm all for the body too. We haven't
Oh.
talked much about knowing through the body, but that to me that's what actual knowing is.
well, this is from the teachings of the sisterhood, and I won't tell you too much information, but I basically learned to cut through the initial panic of a hot flash, which, sorry, you guys, that's one thing you're going to miss. But through the practice of, because there's a bit of adrenaline that hits you,
Yeah.
the fight or flight starts a hot flash. And suddenly your mind goes to, oh, my daughter's been in a terrible car accident.
Yeah.
Or my grandson has broke his leg. All of a sudden you have these incredible thoughts that are, you just feel like you can't control, because you can't, because it's adrenaline, unless you're very practiced. And
Well, without disregarding or belittling the menopause, I'll never understand experientially. Yeah, I think you could say the same thing about addiction or anger or any other reaction. It is there so fast.
there you go.
And if you want to cut the chain, you don't need to talk about 12 links versus 7 links, the other version, etc. You're just using
Right,
the map
right.
to get down to the weak link in that chain. And so I'm all for, if someone memorized the map, I would say, yeah, but do you feel it in your body? Do you know when attraction is turning into craving? Do you know when craving is turning into grasping? Do you know once you've grasped, do you feel that in your body, what you've become? If you don't know it, instantaneously in the body, like you say, you don't have a chance to stop what's coming. So the map is just to reveal what somebody else describes as what your experience is going to be, but you've got to have it yourself.
Yeah,
Insight is direct
ineffable.
knowing. That map of 12 links is not insight. The insight is I see craving and I know how to cut. That's vipassana, clear seeing that leads to useful response.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for bringing it up, because it's like martial arts. If you want to know self-defense, you have to train until your body does it when the situation arises. Practice on the cushion, seeing those impulses arise. Practice letting them arise and fly away without acting, so that when it actually happens, your training takes over. Mastery of a practice is not making something happen on the cushion. It's when your training goes into action when it's needed, without you thinking. The brain is too slow, which is why it takes me an hour to explain the 12 links. But you could say, well, I can feel the impulse coming and I can cut it. Thank you.
It's harder to do with politics.
Yeah. Our Sangha member who's here tonight, Chris Walters, is recently retired elementary school teacher who now engages in local politics in a very tough environment. And he has used his wisdom and his compassion that he learned with the kids. And now it brings it to bear with so-called adults in a very effective. He trained himself for years and now he can use it even in politics.
I noticed you included the 4 objects we cling to in your handout, and I think that's a good explanation for the question of, why do politics upset me so much? And even in the Buddhist time, he recognized that people clung to their rituals and rules, and that's not necessarily just about what goes on in the temple, but what the societal mores are. And somehow I took comfort in that, that it was natural in some ways. Maybe not natural, it's not the right word, but it's common for a people to cling to those things above and beyond just knowing you're right, which that's just your perspective. But there's a tendency there, and it's quite real.
Tribal politics is kind of another version of self-construction.
Mm-hmm.
Basic confusion. Who else has any thoughts on kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity as central to the path? Going to close the door behind me.
George,
Yes.
can you hear me? Empathetic joy is something that is a tricky one for me. I just find that I have experienced envy of people I love, even, friends, professionally or just socially sometimes. And it's hard. That's the most toxic emotion that hits me, I think, because I can't really figure out how to do anything, even if I recognize it, and I hate myself in a way for feeling this way, but it's like hard to get any perspective and step back and look at it and have some means of finding that joy in their joy or their success. any suggestions? I guess is my question. It's empathetic joy. I've been to workshops and retreats where it's been a lot of talk about loving kindness and in the Vipassana tradition and even equanimity and compassion. But sometimes
They leave the joy out.
that one's never really discussed, and that's the one that bugs me the most. And I haven't had much teaching or training in that. And if you could offer some more insight. And also I was listening for the near enemy of that. I didn't quite get what the definition of or an example of the near enemy of the joy is.
It depends on the tradition. The far enemy is pretty clear, right? It's jealousy or envy or something like that. In the Theravada, sometimes they say the near enemy, the one that disguises itself as sympathetic joy, is elation or frivolity, like making everything happy. That's, forget the sympathetic part for a second, just joy. What would be the corruption? The near enemy is a way of, like it could be the corrupt kind of joy is being over-elated. It's not genuine joy.
Yeah.
Like the near enemy of equanimity is indifference or apathy. Looks like equanimity, might even feel like it, but not the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like clapping when you lose the Oscar.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. When you clap for someone else, are you clapping because you're supposed to, because it makes you look or feel better, or because you appreciate joy?
Mm-hmm.
The near and far enemies, in my experience, most of the time on the cushion of formal practice, I spend more time feeling the near and far enemies than I do the actual quality. But think when you're, have you been in a group, maybe in the music group that gathers up there? Sometimes somebody starts laughing and pretty soon you're all laughing and you can't stop. Yeah. So sometimes you don't even know what the joke was. Sometimes I'm doing so much talking, I miss somebody's joke and everybody's laughing, but they're laughing so hard, I start laughing. I don't even know what it's about, but they're laughing. So I laugh too. We've got mirror neurons, right?
No, there was a video you had on your website about getting on the train and this angel of laughter gets on and gets everybody on the train laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have this quality. We have the ability, the quality, the capacity. And because it's joy, we even have the pleasure, right? Compassion hurts, but we have it as an inherent, quality, or at least a potential. So we all have this ability, inherent ability to laugh and enjoy. Pleasure is pleasant. We enjoy it. The only rub is, how come you don't like other people's pleasure and joy? How does that, rather than why, how does that trigger the enemy of mudita or joy? And like the 12 links, it's not why, it's how. How does it happen?
Mm-hmm.
That's the practice. If that's the hard one for you, almost make yourself jealous, kind of construct it and check it out as an experience where, you're by yourself and you can kind of explore it in slow motion. Find the obstacles, find the enemies, and find out what they're about. Julie. I think you're muted.
Hi, Richard.
Hello.
Hey, I think I like you because I think you like jazz.
You got my number.
Yeah, well, I realize you've got mine too.
Okay.
So this business of how do you have joy for someone else's success or whatever? Think of your son or your daughter and project that pride that you would feel for their success or their happiness.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's a real easy kind of slide over to kind of understanding what the joy would be. Not too long ago, I've been introduced to the sadhana of the medicine Buddha and the green Tara. And at some point in those practices, you, after visualizing them in front of you, you take them actually into your self, into your heart, and you are one with them. And that
Mm.
exercise is so potent. And it seems to me that that's useful, that visualization is useful for sharing the joy of someone else. Start with your kids, start with someone you really love, really care about, and then and maybe fool around these kooky dakinis, and there's so many tools in this toolbox. It's amazing. But go jazz.
So Julie's kind of recapitulating the traditional sequence. You start with someone easy that you actually do share, their happiness. Practice with that for a week, a month, 6 months, and then extend it to a stranger that you don't feel strongly one way or the other. And then you might extend it to your enemies, which might include your rivals, right? Someone who does something you do, but they do it better. That makes them an enemy or a rival, right? But you start, like Julie says, with someone in your family or a good friend, where you actually can elicit the sympathetic joy. The other thing that I might add, just with all the immeasurables, start with the intention. So these are not sensations or feelings or emotions primarily. Sensations and feelings and emotions can signal to us whether we are experiencing sympathetic joy or not. But it's not primarily the feeling. It's an intention, especially in the beginning. If those enemies keep coming around, then what you're strengthening as you practice is the intention. May I see through my jealousy. When someone I see is happy, may I be happy because of their happiness. It's just the intention. I'm going to do it. I want to do it. I see the value in doing it. And you may well feel a bunch of jealousy because that enemy is going to come up and try to prevent sympathetic joy. But if you go after the feeling, it's frustrating.
And you have to allow it, just open to it, I think.
Yes. Deal with the enemies gently, but firmly, and with good intention, and the inherent quality of sympathetic joy will be uncovered. Just like awareness. Now, how do you make yourself aware of something? You intend to look, and then you look, but you do it, gently, corner of your eye. There are teachings on mudita, but you have to look for them. They're not like loving kindness all over the internet. You have to get a piece here and a piece there from the books on the four immeasurables. It's often 2 or 3 pages toward the back of the book. Can't tell you why that is. Just a few
Thank you.
more minutes. Everybody's been reluctant. Suppose it also could be useful to ask you a question. We have one class left next week. Are there any topics or areas, challenges, etc., that you had hoped would be covered in these 4 classes?
George, we worked before together with this mysterious thing of seeing the object and the object and the perceiver, and it always escapes me. And I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, but
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in terms of looking at a tree.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's
Anyway,
kind of,
that's always something I go back to and practice. It's always
right.
ungraspable.
So a certain kind of insight practice. I'll see if we can work that in next week.
George, I really appreciate this opportunity to get to know you a little better. You're very open about who you are. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your broad look, across a kind of wider Buddhism. That's quite helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Is there anything along those lines that you think could be useful for the last class, or?
Unfortunately, I don't know what I don't know. Um, so it's hard to,
What if you were going to go to a cabin for a month and do nothing but practice? And there was nobody there. What would you want the tips on or information about?
you know, I don't know if I'm in a stage or of my practice or what it is, but I'm at the point where I'm just waiting and experiencing, and it never ceases to amaze me. Yeah, I don't know if that's an answer, but yeah, time and experience is what I would do with that special retreat that you're offering.
Yeah, I think I can come up with something.
You know,
I have
George, you have, oh, sorry, you go ahead.
okay. So yeah, thanks. One thing I wonder about a lot is motivation for practice. Because it seems like, yeah, my motivations affect the quality of my time sitting so much. And some motivations seem to actually hinder my ability to go deep in my practice. But now that I'm saying that,
Mhm.
maybe they just lead, yeah, I don't know, motivations and where they lead and how they can affect the experience of sitting and also the results off of the cushion.
Yeah,
Because sometimes maybe one motivation will lead to very like deep calm and peace during the sit, and maybe other motivations might cause a difficult sit, but maybe that's actually more beneficial for how I walk and carry myself in the world and treat others and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
George, I appreciate your view on, I don't know how long you've been setting, but long time. Telling, now that all the practices have come to the West, sort of which path is not best, but suited to what kind of practitioner. Like I've heard teachers say, follow one tradition for a year. And if that really doesn't jumpstart your practice, maybe you might want to look at another tradition. And there's such an explosion of resources on the web, not to mention just, books out there. And if you're really saying to a person, don't read so much, just try to go to direct experience, for example.
Yeah,
Which traditions, not, I was just about to say, depending on the personality of the individual. But you yourself said earlier, that the more logical, don't let me put words in your mouth, but more cognitive stuff works for you.
well,
And it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
actually, I meant to say it's a double-edged sword. It's what I'm drawn to,
yeah,
but probably not what I actually need. And this is the problem. We're often poor judges of what medicine to take, but it's a crucial question, primarily for ourselves.
Maybe that's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
what are the 4 or
primarily
5
for ourselves,
questions?
but also if you are going to share or teach, then you can't just know what works for you. I mean, some teachers do that, but then if a student needs something else, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
George,
Yes.
I'm struggling with as a new practitioner and starting during COVID and doing most of my sits online, a few retreats in person, but mostly online. The balance of study and meditation by myself, which I have so much to learn, but also with skillful action coming out of the pandemic and isolation, trying to go back to routines with family, friends, neighbors, but also practice for general society, so that balance is hard for me, the action and the learning. And it doesn't always come naturally since there's a lot of newness.
No.
Yeah,
This is good because several of these are coming together, and I appreciate people sharing them because I was kind of ordering the class as we went through. I knew where I wanted to start, but after that, I had a list of things that I could cover. And I've been kind of making it up as I went along, and I realized with just one class left that I couldn't cover everything that could be covered, and so want to make it useful. So it helps to hear directly, what people are challenged by or they wonder about, and I think I can shape the last class. Again, I don't want to run too long over, but I don't want to cut people off either. If you do have suggestions or questions of something that you'd like to discuss or hear about next week, you could email me. The sooner you do it, the more I'll be able to put something together over the week, but please feel free to send a question or a request or comment by email so that, because I love doing this just for the sport of it, and if nothing else, but the purpose is in order to help ourselves and help each other. So it needs to be relevant. Let's close with a little dedication, just cause. Whatever we were interested in or learned or experienced, we don't want to grasp at it and turn it into another stomach ache. Here's a dedication from the Tibetan tradition. This world arises out of confusion. Greed, aggression, and other forms of suffering arise from that. May we be willing to recognize and feel suffering in order to relieve the same suffering in others. What we see and feel is vivid, yet it is insubstantial. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the sky. The world is open and spacious, and we feel a sense of belonging, of love, and of joy. All beings are essentially free and pure. May we be willing to share that joy with others. For all people living here, together with their families and friends who engage in the teachings with confidence and respect, may all hindrances to their pure Dharma practice disperse and an excellent network of favorable conditions grow like the waxing moon. It is done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, George. Thank you very
Hope
much.
to see you next week. And if you want to learn more about the immeasurables and the version of practice called Taking and Sending, look at the Decaling website for Lama Lekshi's class in March. I forget what it's called, but it's mind training, Lojong and mind training, Taking and Sending. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.